today we have an interesting topic of discussion, that is eclecticism. So, as we all know, it's not a single lane approach, but a multifaceted one, drawing ideas from multiple theories, styles, and ideas to gain complementary insights into a subject. And our speaker for today's session endeavors this approach. So, it gives me immense pleasure to introduce the speaker for today, architect Hannes from Milan, Italy. He's an architect and an interior designer who graduated from the Polytechnic University of Milan. He's the founder of Hanosphere Architecture, which is a design studio that specializes in hospitality and residential spaces. So in addition to the building and transformation of houses, he also excels at product designing. His unique blend of styles and merging of the past and the present is quite extraordinary. And he's also been chosen as one of the 10 new international talents in interior design by AD France. So welcome once again, Hannes, and thank you for being a part of the session today.
And we will now commence the session with a question I suppose you would love. So having your base set in Milan, could you please explain us the saying, Milan has a rough exterior but a golden heart?
That is a very good saying, yeah. I use it a lot. I mean, I use that quote a lot. It works quite well because that is what really happens when you come to Milan. Like, the first approach might not be as welcoming maybe as Rome or Naples, who are extremely beautiful from the exterior already. Milan has a more harsh, a more brutalist maybe exterior. In fact, we use a lot of concrete in Milan since ages, actually. And we use stones that are rather gray, for example, the ceppo di Gre, which is very typical for the Lombardy region. And in Milan, all over the place, it's used in the exterior. So you have this very rough, rather let's say brutalist exterior, and then in the interior everything changes sort of, and that's why we call it the golden heart in the interior, because there everything actually happens. So we have those beautiful courtyards, very typical in the Brera district. For who knows Milan, that's a very central district, very close to Duomo. And there you can spy inside. Sometimes it's really like very tiny doors, and you spy inside, and then literally you see palm trees in the inside and beautiful mosaics on the floor, or bas reliefs on the walls. And it's really interesting, and it really happens to work. I mean, this saying for Milan. So yeah, that is correct.
Yeah. And eclecticism is an amalgamation of variety of contexts. So what is the agenda behind the superimposition of completely contrasting materials and objects? And how is it important to strike a balance between the various types?
That is also a very interesting question and a very interesting topic. And I mean, my whole career, I'm working on exactly these kind of things. My research and Instagram talks exactly about that.
Yeah.
What I can say, like, I would rather let's say layer by layer. I would like to answer your question, because it's really it's really a lot. I mean, it can be almost
a huge topic.
Half an hour answer. Because it's literally the work of my life, or what my studio is about, and what my research is about.
Yeah.
So everything comes to play in eclecticism, and that's what I tell also my students usually, to not be scared of anything, to look at the beauty as well as at the ugly, which usually my students raise the eyebrows exactly when I say the word ugly. You see the eyebrows go up, and they're like, what's going on here? Am I in the wrong course or what? And then they start understanding, because it's really that. I mean, if we only work through beauty, we will never understand contrast, for instance. Contrast is one out of many instruments that you can use as an interior designer, as an architect. So you use, let's say, a very beautiful material like marble, and you put it in contrast to, I wouldn't say an ugly material, but a rather humble material, such as concrete could be. Okay, and the two work together already way differently, as if you would only utilize or use the marble by itself. So the marble spread over 3 or 4 surfaces has one effect. Instead, the marble, which is, let's call it the beautiful material and the humble material, and the both, when they clash together, there is this line where the two actually meet, and that junction point is actually the most interesting point, I would say, in the whole project, because there is a tension, there is a meaning, there is eclecticism, but just regarding two materials. So we can then further bring it out to using two different styles within one project, or two different eras even. I mean, you can take your inspiration literally. That's why I was saying before, you have to look at everything. You don't have to be scared of anything. If you think of Frank Lloyd Wright, for instance, he was deeply identified, or you can identify his architecture through Mesopotamian and even Egyptian architecture. It's all history. And in the Ennis house, you see a house which is completely built in concrete, but then the ornamental elements, they remind you of the Mesopotamian architecture or Egyptian architecture. So, I mean, he wasn't scared of anything. And I think that is a lecture that we should take very seriously in 2020, where everything seems to flatten out, everything seems to be renderizable, everything seems to be sort of, people don't really can differentiate anymore between something that's real and something that is unreal. I'm not saying you cannot render eclecticism, but it gets harder and harder. So when everything is smooth, the render is quite easy. When things get, let's say, more and more sophisticated, more and more refined, then the rendering at some point, weakens out, and reality takes over, and reality becomes more and more important. So, as I said, this answer could take me literally half an hour. It depends how many questions you have. I could build this theme sort of tree-like to a whole lecture. So you tell us.
Go ahead with it. Yeah. You can go ahead, as long as we get to learn how exactly this works. It's a pleasure. Okay.
Then eclecticism is also, as I said, looking at ugly stuff. I as a provocation to my students, in fact, I can only invite who is listening right now to eventually have a peek on my Instagram. So maybe he or she, a student or architect or professional, can better understand what I'm actually talking about right now. So it gets kind of complex from now on. So when I show to my students some kitsch interiors or kitsch architectures, and they're again, raising their eyebrows, and I was like, why showing us, I don't know, love hotels in Japan, for instance. They're super kitsch and have these velvet kind of beds. They have a heart-shaped bed, and maybe they have mirrors all around. And I say, are you sure there's nothing, but really nothing interesting in those interiors? So have a better look, have a deeper look. And that is what eclecticism is about. Not being scared of mixing things and trying to match them and see if there is a reaction, okay? So it always depends. You're the filter in that way. As an architect, you become a filter towards does it work, does it not work? Is it way too kitsch, or is it still interesting? Is there something there that makes it work? I always tend to quote Learning from Las Vegas. Robert Venturi, who now is considered one of the greatest architectural theorists of all times, he was almost laughed at when he was writing a book about Las Vegas. And he was sort of looking at Las Vegas and learning, that's exactly the title of his book. So, and people were like, is this guy crazy? I mean, what's going on here? I mean, all these neon signs, and the strip in Las Vegas. I was like, there's nothing there. There is no architecture, and it's just, to commercialize sort of. It's like marketing that becomes architecture, and I'm like, it sounds kind of interesting, I mean, and it's still interesting if you think that the book was written in the 1960s and 1970s, and still. There is so much to learn from learning from Las Vegas. I would say, and Las Vegas is really kitsch. If we talk about kitsch, that's, the place to go, like all the neon signs and all the flames and hearts and all the different writings. Everyone tends to sort of be the most important hotel, be the most important casino in Las Vegas. So architecture has to perform. And that's exactly what it has to do also in 2020. I'm not saying that's the thing where there is a lot of discussion starting with my students usually when they're like, yeah, but we cannot apply Las Vegas to like scale 1-to-1 or 1-to-1 into reality and make it a project as if it was. And that's exactly where I jump in and say, no, you cannot translate Las Vegas directly and 1-to-1. You have to learn from it, sort of switch, or turn your own switch and make then the lecture or the lesson that you learn from Las Vegas and apply it in something that you think is interesting for you. So you take actually a little piece out of it, and that is what eclecticism is about. So learning, filtering, sort of enhancing if you want, if you're capable, and then apply it. That's I think the whole structure. I mean, logically, that brings you to insert foreign elements into or alien elements into your architectural project, and that's how you work. Let's say the eclecticism, and try to make projects more and more interesting every time you have the chance to express yourself. I mean, there's a lot of commercial architecture where it's very difficult to apply all those lessons, but if you have once in a while, and I have been very lucky to find very courageous and very cool clients who let you express maybe not everything you want to tell. That's also a thing, when we're students, we think every single lecture that we learned, we need to apply it in the first project right away. It won't happen. So if you have a more realistic approach, and that comes by time, you realize that you might have the chance to express 1 or 2 concepts per project, and that is already a lot. Okay, even Rem Koolhaas, and I worked for him for 2 years. Even Rem Koolhaas is not able to express like his whole career in one project. So he would maybe express 1 or 2 main concepts that he's really proud of and he would really fight for, and there are like smaller things that he would be like more open to compromise about. Okay, so that is also a thing I have to tell my students, because we answer to a demand also. That is the social value of our art, of architecture. Yeah. And that is, I think, also very important. So one thing is what we want to express. Another thing is the social value that intrinsically our architecture has. And we, of course, have to respond to that demand.
Yes, that was a very interesting answer. And and following that, there has been many contrasting proposals that we came across your profile. So do share your views on the illusions and the deceptions that you create.
Well, there, I would bring out a sacred master. Paul Rudolph would be one of those masters who are really masters of illusion. And you know what? The thing is, I opened up my studio in 2009. Maybe for you guys, you're very young. 2009 is probably when you started maybe architecture, studying architecture, or maybe you were like in the middle. For me, it was the year when I opened up my studio. 2009 was the world crisis. There was the Black Friday in NASDAQ, in the stock market. And I opened up my studio like literally 1 month after. So everyone is asking, why am I telling you this? Because what I know as an architect is mainly crisis. Everyone in Italy was always talking about crisis, and there was no money, and there was no budget, and so you have to invent and reinvent yourself almost with every project. So there are projects where there is like literally no budget. So what you have to do is really, for every project, invent sort of a language, and in that languages, for myself, and that's how I created a little bit of interest at the beginning for my studio, for the work that we do. And that's mainly sometimes through illusion, using materials that give you the sense of reflection, give you the sense of like not knowing what's happening there, working with very strong contrasts, and so a marble becomes something else, or you use laminates which simulate a very expensive material, but in reality it's really not. So I could quote a project that I was doing back then for a retail company, Iceberg. They do jeanswear. So what I invented for them were those billboards that you see on highways. It's a very 80s thing. I would also say I very much learned from Las Vegas in that project, because those billboards, that's really something that it came up while rereading, I think for the 10th time, learning from Las Vegas. And I was like, come on, and it was like never used in the interior. So let's use the billboards, those billboards, you know, like the triple face ones that turn around, and when they turn, they change the image. And I was like, why not use it in a three-dimensional way, in an architectural way? So literally when these prisms, when they turn around, they change skin. So I was like, in my head, it was like bumping, almost like a headache. And I was like, the retail store that changes its skin every 10 seconds. And it blew the mind of my client in that sense. And it's actually quite a cheap, if you allow me to say so, special effect. But it's a very, very tough one, because when you enter the shop, like one of the surfaces that we put on, and the client was really courageous in doing so, was mirror. So when it turned, the whole store becomes like a mirror box. And then it turns again, and we use the marble surface. Obviously, it's just a photograph. That's why I was saying it's a special effect. So, and it's high definition, but it's just a JPEG. You know, it's a simple JPEG slammed on a billboard, and the whole shop changes skin in like 10 seconds. It's almost instant. You know, and that's what you learn when you work with, I wouldn't say nothing, because of course there is a budget in retail. There is a little bit more budget sometimes in retail than compared to residential project. But that, I think, is a very defined example of what you have to come up with when there is like smaller budgets, and you have to really squeeze your brain and make it come out and do something very strong. And we were very lucky, because that project was then published many times because of the ideas, rather because of the ideas than not because of the actual expensive materials that at that point in that period of time the boutiques were showing off. So there was like maybe Yves Saint Laurent, whose land, like literally marble on all surfaces. It was like a crazy price. Like my clients were, my clients were like, "You're not gonna do something like that for us." We like it in a way, and then it was like provoking my mind so instantly, and I was like, "No, I'm gonna do it." And I called the client and I told him, "Listen, I have an idea how to have marble surface on all surfaces, but at the same time it's super eclectic." And he was already scared because he thought of the price per square meter of such a beautiful material. I'm not saying marble is absolutely beautiful, but it's so expensive, especially when it's on such big surfaces. But if you use the image of it, it becomes something else. It becomes more pop. And I knew that my client was really fond of the pop art, Andy Warhol and so on, and of the 80s. So the billboard thing really, and he connected instantly. And that's what I'm saying. Paolo Girani, that's the client, so I can name him. He's absolutely a super cool guy and very, very smart. And instantly he clicked with the project, with the concept. And so that's how when things go the right way, I could tell you many, many times where it didn't click. So your concept was not or my concept was not understood the way that it did with Paolo in that instance. So that is one example to explain sort of what's happening.
That's actually brilliant. It quite did blow up our minds as well. The kind of concept that you drew up the inspiration from there and trying to replicate it, the courage that you had, and the client as well. Taking it up on a positive aspect. Trying that, it was very nice.